Well, it is that time of the week for Over the Rainbow. Hey, Sharon, how are ya?
Good, and how are you, Mark?
I'm doing okay. We've got some interesting names.
Bobby Rydell, wow.
Bobby Rydell, Estelle Harris.
I got a lot more on Estelle than, other than that she was George Costanza's mother, I found quite a number of other things she did that I went, oh, that was her.
It's funny because I found that she did more than I expected, but I also found that she did a lot less than I expected. But we'll talk about that when we get to her. Yeah.
All right.
But you particularly like Bobby Rydell, and with your background in music, that
yeah.
kind of makes sense.
Even before my two trips as a DJ, 50 stuff, and most people would probably remember. I know a number of people who are Elvis Presley fans. I was never really an Elvis fan. I used to like the movie. Oddly enough, the movie I like the most about Elvis, it doesn't have Elvis. It's Bye Bye Birdie. Bye Bye Birdie was about
a rock star.
No,
an Elvis
Birdie,
like rock star. Yeah.
Yes, Birdie is Elvis. It's
right.
all about when Elvis got drafted. So the whole premise of that whole story is about Elvis being drafted.
And so I assume Rydell played the Elvis character.
Yeah, and a number of great stars in there. Frankie Avalon and Paul Lynde and Bobby Rydell.
Paul Lynde of Hollywood Squares?
Yes, Paul Lynde was in that movie, yeah. He sang a very famous song called What's the Matter with Kids Today?
Okay, yeah. I remember that. We did it in camp.
Yeah, great songs in that movie. And, it had Fabian and it was good stuff,
These are guys that Rydell worked with quite a bit throughout his career.
Lots of those. Well, he was right in there with all those. I guess it wasn't really, there was no Tiger Beat then. So they were the original teen idols,
Yeah.
Bobby Rydell was born Robert Rydell. Is that how you say it? He died from complications of pneumonia, which I find interesting because usually if there are complications of other things that you're sick with, they usually blame that on the virus that we are now dealing with. But 79 years old. So if we go along with what we were talking about the other day about age, he lived a pretty good life, but not really old, right? Rose to fame. He was discovered on a TV show called Teen Club in 1950. He sold over 25 million albums. That's a lot of music. And he landed 34 top 100 hits between 1959 and 1964. So we were a little young for that. But he had 36 top 40 singles, including Wild One, Volare. What I did find out that was interesting was among those songs, he also did Wildwood Days, the Cha Cha Cha, and a song called Forget Him. Now, I'm not really sure. I'm going to have to go Google that or YouTube it. But this song, Forget Him, was an inspiration to the Beatles song She Loves You, which I love, actually.
Forget him if he doesn't love you. Forget him if he doesn't care. Don't let him tell you that he wants you, 'cause he can't give you love which isn't there.
Is that the one that was the inspiration? I know he inspired.
That's the one.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the one. You always wonder where certain songs that the Beatles wrote, or any really, what inspired that. And She Loves You, that one. I didn't know that, I always thought, the Linda Linda or Yoko was behind most of those songs.
Oh, I think Yoko came into the picture much later.
But he sang along Teen Idol along with James Darren, Fabian, and Frankie Avalon. In 1985, he joined Fabian and Frankie Avalon to create the Golden Boys, a trio that performed together for decades. He played Hugo Peabody opposite Anne Margaret's Kim McAfee in Bye Bye Birdie, which first came out in 1963. He appeared on the shows The Red Skeleton Hour, which I vaguely remember. Yeah, I vaguely remember The Red Skeleton Hour because my mom used to be a fan of that show. That was from 1961 to 1965. He also appeared in The Facts of Life in 1987. I kind of remember that episode. Not really, but sort of.
I got a kick, by the way, with the Red Skeleton. I got a kick that they basically created a recurring part from him as Red Skeleton's character's son, Clyde Kadiddlehofer. He was a recurring role as something else Kadiddlehofer.
Yeah, but like in the Facts of Life, I think he had something to do with the character by Natalie, I think. But he also became a fixture of pop culture in Greece. And one thing I did not realize, you remember the school was named Rydell High?
Yeah.
They named it after him.
No, I did not know that.
It was a tribute to Bobby Rydell that they named the high school Rydell High. I did not know that. So he also wrote a memoir, which I didn't know. So he co-wrote a book called On the Rocks, A Tale of Second Chances, about his battles with alcoholism and depression after the death of his first wife. And
he was with her for 35 years.
Yeah, and here's something that I think would kind of resonate with you. He also wrote in a book about recovering from a double organ transplant.
Actually, why that really nailed me?
Yeah.
Because his organ transplant was on July 9th, 2012. My wife was taken off life support and her organs were harvested on July 7th, 2012.
Very close. Yeah, that just actually sent goosebumps to me.
So it's not out of the question.
Absolutely not.
I mean, so that kind of gave me a little bit of a quiver.
You just did it for me. I mean, I knew it was close because we've talked about that, but I figured that would have got you. So
the timing and the fact did get me. That would actually be kind of a kick. He also suffered one of the that I thought was more common and in some ways seems less. He lost control of good parts of his catalog for a while and suffered because of that. He didn't have full rights to all his music, had to re-record much of it to eventually, go back and tour and make some money off it.
Well, back then, the studios used to own the rights a lot of times.
Yeah, but it's funny. I got to talk to a lot of older artists, and I had thought it was more common than it turned out to be. Or where they felt more taken advantage of. And as another example, a lot of the black, you're talking about Elvis, a lot of black singers in the 50s, Little Richards and things like that. Some of his music didn't become popular till Pat Boone sang some of it. And, some of the other groups. And he made money off their original music. Elvis capitalized on a lot of that music. And I said, there has to be some hostility, some resentment. And everyone I spoke with almost all said, not really. They brought us entire new exposure to new audiences that never would have found us. They introduced us to white audiences in a way that we never would have been able to. So, it's not exactly losing control of your catalog, but things that we thought perceived as abuses turned out to be benefits for a lot of the artists. But cool. This one, he seemed to be, victimized more than benefited. But he also seems to have managed to overcome it. And
yeah, I didn't realize that he was an alcoholic. That was disappointing news to me. Yeah, that was.
There's a lot of downtime on the road and a lot of people buying you drinks. I've actually seen it happen. But he lived and died a household name. No,
absolutely.
Lived and died a household name. He's a chapter that maybe some people thought was already closed, but now is, if you so to speak.
Well, you go back to the 50s. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of classic rock. So he'll always be relevant.
Now let's move on to Estelle Harris, who just seems such a fixture, on television.
Yeah, so her real name was Estelle Nussbaum.
You mean she was Jewish?
Yeah. And that doesn't surprise me. And she was born in Hell's Kitchen's neighborhood of Manhattan. Her parents were Polish Jewish immigrants who owned the candy store. So
how unique.
Yeah. After her children grew up, she began pursuing acting, and she achieved early success in television commercials. See, that sort of resonates with me. So I sort of remember that. And she logged 23 different spots in 1 year at one point. And this I don't remember. It says one of her most famous commercials had her energetically singing the praises of handy rap.
Oh, you ain't got a thing if you ain't got that cling. Do-rap, do-rap, do-rap.
So I'm pretty good at those jingles, but I do not remember a jingle about handy rap. Do you?
I do not. I remember handy rap spots, but I don't remember.
Yeah, but I don't remember, usually you remember plop, plop, fizz, fizz, and things like this. And that I don't remember. In 1977, she began her long-format acting career in the film Looking Up, about 3 generations of, guess what? Working-class Jewish family in New York City.
See, that's what I found fascinating. I got the sense that she started her commercial acting career much earlier and before the kids really grew up. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really see specifics. But her first real major acting role, she was 49. In 1977, she was 49 years old and got her first real role. That to me is insane.
It sort of almost reminded me of, like, last week we were talking about our 103-year-old blogger who didn't start her second career until she was 99. So I was like, oh, here's another one. So yeah, she waited until the kids grew up.
So that's what I'm saying. She seemed like such a fixture, but then you go through her resume. She was George Costanza's mother.
Too bad you can't do that for a living. You'd be very successful at it. You could sell out Madison Square Garden. Thousands of people could watch you. You could be a big star.
All right, Mama, that's enough.
I want you to go see a psychiatrist.
No, I am not going to see a psychiatrist.
Why? Why not? Why won't you go?
Because I don't want to.
Which most people relate to. Like I've said many a time, I'm not a Seinfeld fan, but
I'm actually rewatching them. I've been binge watching it on Netflix. In a minute,
but she did a lot of voiceover work.
A ton
of voiceover work, and Mrs. Potato Head, of course, in Toy Story.
I'm packing you an extra pair of shoes and your angry eyes, just in case.
Okay, fellas, let's roll.
Don't talk to any toy you don't know.
You have saved our lives. We are eternally grateful.
You saved their lives. Oh, my hero. They're so adorable. Let's adopt them, Daddy.
Oh,
no. And
married to Don Rickles.
That I did not read that.
He was Mr. Potato Head.
That's pretty cool. I knew that, but
he was Mr. Potato Head. As a matter of fact, he appeared posthumously as Mr. Potato Head.
In the movie. I thought you meant she was married to him.
No.
Okay, that's better. Yes. Yes. So yeah, but she also provided the voice for Mama Gouda in Tarzan 2.
A ton of voices.
She had a recurring role as Maury in The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which I know is a hit show that I never really got to watch. She also did other voice work. Lula and Dave the Barbarian, Mama Lipsky and Kim Possible, Thelma in The Proud Family, Mrs. Turtle in the Mickey Mouse Works, and House of Mickey, Death's mother in Family Guy, the Old Lady Bear and Brother Bear. That I did see. That was a good movie. And Audrey in Home of the Range. She also provided the voice of Marty's wife in the American Dad episode in Country Club. I mean, it goes on and on. So good for her.
Yeah, but that's what I was getting at. So she's done a lot of voiceover, and most of her TV appearances were one-offs. She had a part. I think she was in a Married with Children here, and she was in a Law and Order there, and so she was constantly a face on TV, but she wasn't. Even Seinfeld,
right?
I'm binge watching Seinfeld. She doesn't appear until like season 3, and she's only in about 24 episodes.
Yeah, and she also was in The Voyager, which is part of that Star Trek type thing. I was a Voyager fan as well, and she played. I remember this episode. She played a projection, like she wasn't really there, but she was in a program in a season 3 episode called Sacred Ground, where she played a small role as Bridget in Out to Sea in 1997. So she's part of that whole Star Trek community, Voyager. So she also, yeah. So that rang a bell for me.
Yeah, so it's like
my voice is going to go in and out because it's raining here and my allergies are just
God,
not happy.
I left my allergies when I left New York. Like I said, she just seems like such a fixture on TV, but it's so much his voice, and she had one semi-regular part and a whole lot of appearances. Yet everybody today knows Estelle Harris, who didn't make her first significant appearance until she was almost 50. And yet here she is. And I just think that's where it's sold. Now, unless there's just anything else about Estelle, who like I said, will be missed.
Nope, that's what I have on Estelle.
Now I got to take people behind the scenes a little bit, because you and I are constantly bouncing names back and forth. We see a lot of the same sources. We have different resources, and anyone who has passed that's of any note, and obviously we don't even do, a tenth of the names that make our list.
Oh, sure.
Some resonate with you, some resonate with me, some resonate with both of us. And we usually work it out. Now this next one, I know we had some real back and forth, and Terry Wallis, the comma guy, and you seem to not be understanding why I was so passionate about doing something on the comma guy, about a guy on with punctuation.
Well, let's hear it. Go for it.
You were supposed to pick up on me calling him the comma guy and correct me.
I know. No, I know. No, I wasn't. I got it. I just didn't.
You weren't going to humor me.
No, wasn't going to bite.
All right. Terry Wallis was a man who was in a very bad car accident at age 20, spent 19 years in a coma. Came out of the coma in 2003 and gradually recovered and regained a great deal of function, and died this past week, 19 years after coming out of the coma.
I do believe they said it was almost a week to the day, right?
That's possible. I didn't look at that, but that's possible.
Yeah, and really all I got out of it was that The family was very devoted. They took him home on weekends. The doctors felt that him being home would help him wake up. And from what my limited resources were on this particular gentleman, all I got out of that was that he was a quadriplegic, and that his family cared for him very much, and he liked music and, you know, things that really matter to his family. Now, you seem to have been able to do a deeper dive, and so I'm going to let you speak to that.
I know this touched us both because, as we've referenced, even touched on this morning already, my wife was taken off life support. It'll be 10 years this July, and that decision was made within hours of her collapse. We just knew there was no hope. And I know that you dealt with it personally in your family situation. And before my wife, I had another major exposure with a very close relative, where we had to wrestle with deciding whether or not to pull the plug. And it's a very difficult decision. And here we have this family that kept their son alive, or husband alive. His baby had just been born a few weeks earlier when he had his accident. One of his friends died in the accident.
Yeah, and his daughter grew up without a dad.
That's right. That's right. Because he was in a coma for 19 years. But the difference is, as I dug a little deeper, he never was without brain function. It wasn't. I mean, there are measurements that they do. In my wife's case, both sides of her brainstem had essentially exploded. You know, there was nothing there. He had brain function all throughout the 19 years, and even what they described as some level of consciousness that they could perceive. So that makes it a total different. He wasn't a vegetable in that respect. He was able. There were responses to stimulus that made keeping him on support a valid decision. And I do know of people, as a matter of fact, I had worked closely with the gentleman who had a massive stroke that they did think he had been declared dead. And he was this close. They should have pulled the plug. He was actually a very famous ad man. And he recovered. He was different. He'll tell you he was different. He could never be the advertising man he was. He created the Fruit of the Looms guys. And he had to learn everything like in his 30s and 40s. I mean, he had to learn how to feed himself and walk and talk. But in his 80s, it's been 10 years. I don't know if he's still alive. I should check. But he had a very full, active, and different life. But you wouldn't know, talking to him, that he had this massive transformation. He was one of those 1 in a million that recovers from these should-be fatal strokes. But what Terry Wallis went through was not at that level. And when he did recover, regain consciousness, he had memories. He was literally Rip Van Winkle. He thought it was still 1984. And he had memories of before the accident. He never really fully had memories from the 19 years after. He did not have short-term memory going forward that much, but it was communicative. He was involved. He regained a good deal of function, not full function. I believe he was dependent on a wheelchair, although quadriplegic, quads can walk. A person can be fully defined as a quadriplegic and still walk. So I'm not sure what level of physical disability he had, but he had the ability to control parts of his body. He had speech disorders, but he was able to communicate. He was able to be part of his family. And on top of that, by studying his progression for the next almost 2 decades that he lived, they were able to see areas that they did not know, where different parts of the brain reconnected themselves or connected differently to work around areas that had been damaged, to regain function that they didn't think was possible to regain. So there are things that were learned from his survival and his 19 years of life that who knows how we might benefit from in the future, much like we talked about the gentleman who received the pig transplant, the genetically modified pig heart, and died a couple of months later, which was not unexpected, but he had 2 halfway decent months of life. And we probably learned a lot of things that will make the next experiments of that sort more successful. Terry Wallis had opportunity to spend time with his family, to spend some time with his daughter. I mean, she didn't raise her, but it was of his flesh and blood. I you know, that I don't think it was. I mean, there was a case out here, a poor girl, 12-year-old girl who went into some sort of massive shock and went into a complete coma and was declared brain dead by every hospital. And her family literally has kept her alive. I think she's still alive to this day, almost 9 years later, with literally a machine just pumping fluids through her body.
That sounds a little bit like Karen Ann Quinlan.
Yes. You know, but I don't think Wallis was ever in that level of vegetative state where it was, you know, you see, if there's a chance that someone can come out of a coma, you know, if on day one you say, yeah, he's going to come out, it's going to be 20 years from now, you know, that's one thing. But if he's in a coma, yeah, you know, he shows brain function. He shows responsiveness. He's not conscious, but there are signs of brain function. He could come out in a month. He could come out in 6 months. You know, you can't predict. You don't know on day one that it's going to be 19 years. So when do you make that decision?
It's a tough one.
And having come out, was it the wrong decision to leave him in that state for almost 2 decades, for him to then have 2 decades of life? I can't see that it was, aside from the fact that we have probably gained from the research lessons from what he experienced that could help us in the future.
Okay.
I just thought it was a more upbeat and interesting story than at first than just a mere kind of Tales from the Crypt kind of novelty.
Okay.
That when I first saw the headline. But I'm glad we visited that story. Now our next guest, I keep calling them guests. Our next feature, June Shagaloff Alexander.
Yeah. Once in a while, you call them honorees, which is okay also.
That's better, yes.
You know.
That's better.
Yeah. I found this very interesting. It was very hard. I mean, there was an awful lot of information. I could go on about her for a while. So I tried to scale it down a little. If you feel like I'm getting a little that I went overboard, by all means, you can.
I'll pull that plug now. Then, no, go ahead. Take all of 7 minutes you want.
Okay, so we got to time it, huh? I thought we had that kind of thing where we weren't timing.
No, of course things, not. So 7.
She
even go 7 minutes 15 seconds. That's fine.
She was one of these names. You know how we often run into these people we should be household names.
Yeah, absolutely.
She definitely, without a doubt, deserves that. Now, the thing is, so most people know who Thurgood Marshall is, right?
Right, of course.
Well, she was very much linked in with Thurgood Marshall. She was very prominent in school desegregation. She was a leader, in fact. She worked for the NAACP and its legal arm in the 1950s and 60s, and it put her at the forefront of the nationwide fight for schools integration, and made her a close confidant of civil rights figures like Thurgood Marshall and James Baldwin. She joined the civil rights movement as a college student, beginning as an intern with the NAACP, with their legal department, which later became a separate entity, and the Legal Defense and Education Fund. In 1951, when Thurgood Marshall ran the department and became a Supreme Court justice, he hired her soon after she graduated and put her to work on a project that was already consuming almost all of the department's energies.
The one thing I just have to interject one thing here. Because one of the things that makes her a little unique, and like I said, I'd never heard of her before this. You know, there was Rachel Dolezal, who was the head of the NAACP, who was a white woman who chose to pass as black and became the head of the NAACP.
She is actually white, but because, and I'll get to that, she is white, but because of, you know, how people tan, sometimes they look black. So there were times where, you know, I'll get to that.
Right.
There are times where
she experienced bigotry.
Yeah, it made her the perfect person for this.
But as opposed to Dolezal, who literally pretended to be black.
Well, I mean, in a way, she did that is she used that to help her causes. So after he hired her, under the direction of the historian John Hope Franklin, she spent months at the New York Public Library reading through the congressional record to assess the legislative intent behind the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law, right? It's supposed to be man. If it doesn't, all men are created equal, doesn't mean, you know, I mean, women went through their own fight, right? For that, it means man as in human, right? So
sure, if you want to look at it that way.
Right. She also collaborated with psychologist Kenneth and Mimi Clark in their research into the psychological impacts of segregated education on Black children, including their famous experiment showing that Black children from segregated schools preferred white dolls over Black ones. I thought that was really interesting. She visited segregated school districts to amass on-the-ground insights for Mr. Marshall's legal team. So this is what you were talking about. Although she was white, her dark complexion sometimes led people to assume she was Black, to the point of barring her from certain white-only public spaces, an experience that helped shape her early commitment to civil rights. The ambiguity proved to be an asset in her work when investigating a segregated school district, because she would visit a white school pretending to be a prospective white parent, then do the same as a Black parent pretending to be a prospective Black parent. So that was like, ooh, right? So that's sort of what you were talking about. Then she continued her work after the Supreme Court declared school segregation unconstitutional in its 1954 decision in Brown versus Topeka Board of Education. She worked with both white and Black families to prepare them for integration with local civil rights groups to test the speed and commitment of school districts to desegregation. So most people don't know the name June Shagaloff. So, you know, this is where I made sort of a note to make sure we recognize that she should be a more noted, famous name than she is. She was particularly active in New York City, helping to organize a series of boycotts by Black families against the city school system after the NAACP and other civil rights groups accused it of not doing enough to integrate its schools. So I'm wondering if that, like, I think when we went to school is kind of like when all the busing situations started.
Yes.
You know, busing in kids. So I'm wondering if that had something to do with it. She was quoted as saying, "I grew up with two racial identities." She said that in an interview in 2014. From September to June, she was a white child, and from June to September, she was a child of color, to those who didn't know her. And she couldn't understand, and some people couldn't understand that since she was the same person, how people could treat her so differently. She retired from the NAACP in 1972. I found this interesting as well. And later moved to Ashkelon, Israel, where she helped found the Ashkelon Branch of Peace, now a liberal group working to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. She moved back to the United States in the 1980s, where she lived in Rockland County, New York, just north of New York City, and worked on the board of Child Development Center. So she was amazing. I don't know how. There's a lot more, but like I said, I shrunk a lot of the information. We could do like a whole show on her, but she was amazing. So she was very, very relevant in.
And she did. Yeah, she took on important and difficult issues between the Palestinians and living in Israel, and the racial strife in some of the toughest areas during the toughest time. It was an impressive resume.
Very impressive.
Absolutely someone who should have been famous, should have been something of a household name.
Yeah, so that was, like I said, I had a whole lot more information, but I'm fine with moving on from there unless you have anything to add.
No, I think you did a terrific job encapsulating her. And I hope people go look further into her. She's associated with all sorts of important decisions.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much more that she had to do with, but that's where I had to curtail. Like she was involved in so many different ways in other countries and helping them with integration of various important progressions. So our next honoree, I will say.
Our next honoree
is Tommy Davis, baseball player. He was 83 years old. He was noted. I knew he had been with the Baltimore Orioles and with the Dodgers. But when I read
I know what you're about to say. Yeah, I think I know where you're about to go. He was almost a Yankee.
Yeah. He was set to sign with the New York Yankees before getting a call at home
from Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson, of all people.
That's hard. You know what? That would be hard to say no to.
Absolutely. Well, this is, of course, when the Dodgers were still with Brooklyn. But it was like his mother picked
he was a Brooklyn boy.
Yes, he was. But,
I'm sorry, can I call him a Brooklyn boy?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. He was a Brooklyn boy. He was not a boy. He was a Brooklyn boy. So, but yeah, his mother picks up the phone. It's Jackie Robinson. She calls her son to the phone, and he's dumbfounded. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm on the phone with Jackie Robinson," and he's like, he couldn't believe he was speaking with one of his heroes, although he didn't remember doing very much talking. And he ended up signing with the Dodgers for a $4,000 bonus, which was a lot of money back then.
Now he, I remember Tommy Davis. I remember him as a player, but there's a lot of guys who play that. I didn't realize that he played 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize he was always in the conversation. He was
a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, he was MVP against like Roberto Clemente. He was just ahead of her, behind people like Clemente and Frank Robinson. Undeniable, absolute superstars.
Yeah, he won batting titles in the Midwest League in 1957, hitting .357 in the Pacific Coast League in 1959. And when he got to the majors, Davis got to the majors at the end of that year of 59, playing in one game in the Dodgers. At first year in Los Angeles, played all 3 outfield positions and third base his first 2 seasons. And in 1962, he moved to left field and he became a superstar. In his first year at Dodger Stadium, he won the National League batting title that year, just like he did twice in the minors. And then in 1963, he did it again, hitting .326. That's outstanding. He's had 2 batting titles by the time that he turned 24. And he made, in 62 and 63, he made the All-Star team, playing in games in 62. And the last of 4 years in which the major leagues held 2 midsummer classics. He played in one more season with the Dodgers in 1966 when the team made their 3rd World Series in 4 years. And then he was a Met. Aren't you a Met fan?
Yeah, he was a Met briefly. As a matter of fact, he was a Met and part of the trade that brought the Mets Tommy Agee and Al Weiss, who proved to be absolute key parts of that 69 season. So
yeah, 1966. Let's see. He was traded 3 more times after that. After he was traded to the Mets that offseason in a 4-player deal. And then it says back then moving was the norm for Davis. And the rest of his career, he was traded 3 more times. He played for 9 teams after leaving the Dodgers. And
he hit .306 in 1973 and had 181 hits in 1974. And he was on the MVP ballot as a finalist. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had a long career and success all through it. I think the only area that he probably was light in 17 years, he had less 153 home runs. He did not a lot of power.
There was an injury. I forget what I read. There was an injury that I think to his leg that ended his career. After his playing days, he briefly became an instructor with the Dodgers and was the Mariners hitting coach in 1981 under manager Maury Willis, his former teammate. And he also worked in the Dodgers community relations department.
Now, he admitted that he resented a little bit that he became a journeyman, that he went to 10 different teams. He played for 10 different teams. But he admits that part of it was he seemed to have this lazy attitude about him. But he said the more laid back he was, the more successful he was. But it was perceived wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Bernie Williams had that kind of tab also. He just wasn't an intense guy, that's all.
But there are other players who've moved from team to team who, rather than take the attitude as why does this team want to get rid of me, but that means there's another team that wants to take him on.
Exactly. There's somebody that really wants you, so there's a way of looking at it, right?
Yeah. By the way, it's been said about baseball that free agency leads to, I think Jerry Seinfeld's line was, we're rooting for laundry, we're not rooting for players. But in fact, there was actually more player movement from team to team before free agency than since. It really, that hasn't changed at all. But Tommy Davis was more of a substantial ball player than I realized. He was just always in the conversation.
Yeah, no, he was an excellent player. So I guess we're moving along to the Mighty Diamonds.
The Mighty Diamonds.
The Mighty Diamonds had real tragedy hit them by losing 2 of their members almost within a week of each other, I believe. What do you have on them?
Yeah, it's strange. This one is kind of one of those stories that I thought was going to be more than it was, because it seemed really coincidental having 2 members die separately days apart. But turns out that one of the fellows had a stroke. I believe Fitzroy Bunny Simpson had a stroke many years ago. and really didn't perform much. So it's not like it was a functioning group. And two of the three guys died. It was just two guys who had been part of this group that wasn't active anymore. And one died ultimately succumbing to his health. And Donald Tabby Shaw died as a result of a gangland shooting related to his son.
That was really more tragic. He was shot dead in a drive-by shooting.
Yeah, but apparently he wasn't necessarily a random / innocent victim.
Bystander?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it involved, as they say, a gang feud involving his son, that suggests putting yourself into that's like saying, is the father, what's that saying? Is the son responsible for his father's sins, or vice versa? Right, vice versa. I guess so.
Yeah.
But but like we had the drummer from the Foo Fighters, Taylor Hawkins. They were supposed to appear that night, and he died. They were scheduled to appear on the Grammys, and he died a few days before.
The Foo Fighters canceled. They canceled their tour. They wouldn't appear anywhere after that.
So when you see the headline that two members of the jazz trio, of the R&B trio, died days apart, you say, well, boy, that's going to affect their tour. Yeah, well, he's been the one who's been in the hospital since 2015.
Right. Well,
not like they were touring.
What I did find interesting, and a lot of these groups form this way. I mean, even when you go back to Simon and Garfunkel, they went to school together. These guys had become friends in school in the mid-1960s, and they were originally called the Limelights, and they renamed themselves the Mighty Diamonds after Shaw's mother started referring to them as the Diamonds. The Mighty Diamonds were a Jamaican harmony trio, recording roots reggae with a strong Rastafarian influence, and the group was formed in 1969, and they remained together till about 2012. Their smooth harmonies and choreographed stage show were inspired by nonetheless Motown vocal groups of the 1960s, with Shaw listing the Temptations, the Stylistics, the Impressions, and the Delphonics as influences, as well as Jamaican rocksteady artists such as John Holt and Ken Booth.
You sure they weren't influenced by like Frankie Avalon or Bobby Rydell or anything?
Because Jamaican music is a very different vehicle than the rock, the ground root classic rock that Bobby Rydell helped create the following for. In the mid-1970s, they worked with producer Joseph Hu Kim that gave them their real breakthrough. Country Living and Hey Girl were recorded and released by the Channel One label. A Right Time followed on Hu Kim's well-charged label and cemented their status as one of the top Jamaican groups of their time.
One of their biggest was Pass the Coochie, which is the same song that became a one-hit wonder here, Pass the Coochie, by another band.
Right.
Popular, but it's the same song, Dave.
Jano, pass the coochie on the left hand side. Pass the coochie on the left hand side.
Coochie and Doochie are the same thing, apparently.
I think it came out in the group's Deeper Roots, released in 1979, and again released by Virgin on its Frontline label. And it says 1980s, they recorded with producer Gussie Clark, largely using old Studio One tracks as the basis of their recordings, and dub plates of these sessions became popular on sound systems in Jamaica, New York, and in London, particularly that particular song that we're talking about, Pass the Coochie, written by Ferguson and Simpson, which became an international hit twice when it was first released on their 1982 album Changes. Tabby, Bunny, and Judge have issued over 40 albums in their long career.
Oh, wait a second. Are you saying that Bunny Diamond Simpson wrote the song "Pass the Coochie"?
It says he co-wrote it.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and in 2021, the group was honored in the National Honors and Awards on Jamaica's 59th anniversary of independence.
Interesting.
You have anything else to add, Mark?
I do not. I know we have some. We've seen some interesting names already pass our screen in advance for next week's show, but I don't have anything more for this week's show. I don't think.
So I guess it's time to wrap things up for this week's episode of Over the Rainbow, and I would like to add that you just don't know what's happening tomorrow. So show your love for those you care for today, because there may not be a tomorrow. But we hope you'll be here next week for our next edition of Over the Rainbow.
That sounds like something to look forward to. Thank you, Sharon Yankowitz.
It's my pleasure, Mark Silverman.
And if you've enjoyed this episode of Over the Rainbow, please leave us a comment on the Facebook page, and we will get a web page built pretty soon. Are they still doing web pages?
I believe so. I'm looking forward to getting ours going.
We'll do that. Well, I will talk with you soon. Until next week.
See you then.